Narelle Mackie was going through her normal morning ritual. She was out of bed, sitting in her lounge room, about to prepare breakfast. Then all of a sudden, an almighty thud.
I heard a terrific bang and wondered what it was. Most of my dolls went flying. Couldn't get out my front door.
That bang was this prime mover crashing into the side of her house. At around 8:20, the driverless semi carrying roofing supplies rolled down Kangaroo Street. It hurtled through the front yard of one property and came to a halt, smashing into Narelle's lounge room where she was sitting.
So it must have really given you a jolt at the time?
Well and truly a jolt.
The truck driver told police that he pulled on the brake, then jumped out of the vehicle to check his load. Then the truck simply rolled away. RTA inspectors checked the truck, including the brakes. Police say a mechanical fault could be to blame, but inquiries are continuing. The impact caused substantial structural damage, shifting the house so much that the front door jammed closed. As for Narelle, she's a little shaken, but thanking her lucky stars, the whole incident wasn't much more serious. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
The University of Newcastle, one of the Hunter's biggest employers, has been rocked by news of a massive debt. So it may come as a surprise to hear that academics and office staff will receive a 17% pay increase. They're also now entitled to 26 weeks paid parental leave, all negotiated before the debt was uncovered. But the university's Vice-Chancellor says the new agreement won't be renegotiated.
University staff are not well paid compared with industry or business, and so I think our staff have deserved to get a pay increase.
The body representing university staff, the Community and Public Sector Union, says the entitlements are on par with what staff at other regional unis are paid.
This agreement was negotiated some years ago, even though it was only certified yesterday, and at the time we were actually asking for more than the 16.8% we actually got.
This enterprise bargaining agreement expires next year, and negotiations are soon to begin on the next. The union won't rule out the possibility of staff opting for a pay cut in the next agreement, in an effort to stem job losses, now bound to happen given the university's financial woes. Christine Tondorf, NBN News.
Bank Corner, built in the 1890s, it burnt down and was then rebuilt in the 1930s. In recent years, the owners have allowed artists and squatters to move in, the latter almost destroying the building once again.
Last August, July, we kicked them all out, basically. I know it sounds terrible, but it's a sad fact that we had to do something with the building. They were going to destroy it, basically.
Yes, I was surprised to see that the owner of that building has neglected it over the last few years, but it looks like they are, at long last, starting to do something about the upper stories.
Its interior is now being totally restored for office space. The developers say when complete, engineers and archaeologists are set to move in, while there's also been interest from a beautician. Across the street, big changes are due for the derelict Bellevue Hotel. An application is before council to build a 7-storey apartment block on the site with retail outlets on the ground floor. In the plans for the Bellevue apartment development, the facade of the old pub is to be retained. Thankfully, though, it will be restored to its original condition. The developers hope Bellevue Apartments will be approved this month. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
The Pirates began their raid, plundering points from Western Sydney from the start. In front of a record crowd of 4,000, the Hunter boys led at every break, with Damon Lowry and Brian Weathers teaming up in spectacular fashion. Weathers went on to score 31 points for the game, placing him on track to be the season's leading scorer. He was backed up by Kavossi Franklin, who slam-dunked his way to 22 points for the game. The Razorbacks' Scott McGregor notched up 23. They had to do without Simon Dwight after he was swiped in the eye in the third quarter and had to sit out the remainder, sending Western Sydney back to the drawing board. Russell Hinder was vital in defence as the Pirates piled on 37 points in the final quarter to finish the game 127-100. They now go into the playoffs and will face Brisbane in the elimination quarter-final on Wednesday night.
Well, there's no question that if we play to the best of our ability and play good defence and don't make errors, unnecessary errors, then we can beat anybody.
The Pirates will now have to break their away game hoodoo to advance. Coach Hurley says if his players can put aside their dismal record on the road, there'll be great rewards.
Tucked away behind Caves Beach, Spoon Rocks is an area generally reserved for locals. For the Wallara Peninsula Ocean Swim, though, it's the start of a 1.5 kilometre course up the coast to Caves Beach. It's a change in conditions compared to the pool for Justin Norris, who, even after emerging, kept tabs of his rivals.
I had a few of the surf guys in there navigating for me, but around the last can, it's like the last 50, so you just got to go for it from there.
It was 23-year-old Matthew Gray who was pipped by the Olympian, the surf swimmer from Batteau Bay in front until the last leg.
Then he jumped straight on my feet and blew me away at the end there. But no, it was good feeling, knowing that you can mix it with some of the best swimmers in the country.
A national champion over 10Ks, Catherine Ware from the Gold Coast edged out teammate and friend Shelley Clark to take the women's title.
Starting at the beach, running out, the water was beautiful, clear, nice and warm, and it was so safe the whole way through. There was lots of people around and you could see the bottom, you could see fish swimming underneath you. It was just lovely.
Lovely too for organisers, with 500 swimmers taking the plunge, competitor numbers well and truly up on last year.
It's been a horror week for the Knights, and definitely one Chairman Michael Hill and NRL boss David Gallop would like to forget. Today it was time for damage control. Major sponsors who plough around $6 million into the club each year were called in for an hour-long meeting of coaxing and coercing to stay on board.
Well, the sponsors are anxious about our reputation, but just about all of them have indicated their support. There's some who've asked us for further discussions, and we'll have them over the course of the next week.
And there's still a cloud over the naming rights sponsor since the Bathurst scandal. The Knights remain tight-lipped about the name of the sponsor, but didn't rule out Gizmondo Europe, an international electronics company, which produce a handheld multimedia device.
The sponsorship manager has said that it's an electronics company. Can you confirm that?
Well, if he said it, I'll certainly confirm it.
It's a sponsorship deal said to be worth around $700,000.
We think that it's past the post, but as it was last week, it's not signed off.
And while there's hope major dollars will still come in, they're certain to lose that $100,000 to the NRL despite a possible appeal.
They've got an opportunity to make some submissions about that. Obviously, we would like to see them accept the penalty and everyone gets on with getting ready for the year.
It's a sight and sound Lake Macquarie residents have lived with for 43 years, but not for much longer, because in just 6 weeks' time, flights will cease from Pelican Airport. In March, the Aviation Transport Security Program comes into being, forcing all airports to adhere to tighter security controls. Pelican owner International Air Parts has decided it doesn't want to spend the hundreds of thousands required to bring Belmont up to scratch.
Rather than do that, relocate our entire operation to Williamtown. Belmont, as an airfield, will essentially cease.
Speculation is rife over the true motivation for the move, as IAP has completed an application to rezone the site as a residential subdivision and is also taking court action in an effort to get council to compulsorily acquire the airport.
Is this a part of the pressure? I imagine it is, but it probably also fits in with their business plan as well.
Pelican plans to expand its existing services in Williamtown to include flights to areas such as Maitland, Cessnock, Albion Park and Grafton.
It's actually a new beginning for Pelican. We are going to look at new route structures, larger aircraft.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News. Juliana, Angela and Rowena Fung are high tea with Mrs. Wu. Their Malaysian background is evident in their flamboyant designs, which combine unexpected patterns, textures and shapes with a rich colour palette. Now their beautiful garments will be viewed by one of the most important audiences of all, the buyers, magazine editors and international representatives who flock to Mercedes Fashion Week.
We need buyers and to get our designs out there.
High tea will be showcased in the New Generation segment, where the likes of internationally renowned designers Subi, Akira Isagawa and Sassen Bide began. The trio won the amazing opportunity through a competition known as the Startup Awards. Another valuable part of their prize is involvement in what's called a mentoring program.
We can now ask them for some help on PR, marketing, business advice, maybe production advice, get some help from different designers.
The girls have just 10 weeks to come up with 12 outfits for the show.
He'd rather be gearing up for a playoff match tonight against Adelaide, but instead Brian Weathers is saying his goodbyes. It's with fond memories, though. He'll leave for home in a few weeks of his NBL season. Arriving only days before it began, he started with a bang and only got better. A standout for the Pirates, he made the All-Stars game and recently took out the league's leading scorer title.
it's definitely going to be hard to leave here, seeing as the relationships I've built.
The athletic guard to now push for a spot in an NBA side back home.
That's always been, a dream of mine. And, I had a little setback with the injury I had coming out of college. And, I'm really worked myself to a point to, to make a strong push for the league. So I want to go do that.
Surprisingly, Pirates General Manager Butch Hayes is trying to ensure Weather's return trip is successful, given his contacts back in the States. But if things don't quite work out...
The door is definitely open, and if things don't work out over there, hopefully he'll do the right thing and come back with us.
As for the rest of the side, only Russell Hinder, Brad Davidson and last year's club MVP Geordie Cullen are contracted past this season. After a review from coaching staff, negotiations will then begin with the rest of the squad. But it's Hurley's signature that remains the top priority. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
A hotspot for theatre in Newcastle during much of the 80s and 90s, the Playhouse, with its intimate atmosphere, has been sorely missed. Tonight, the venue bursts back into life with a comedy written by Newcastle playwright Carl Caulfield and acted by a talented cast including well-known faces Barry Shepherd and Rod Ansell.
It's just something we haven't really seen in Newcastle before. It's a play about Newcastle right now, and there's a lot of issues.
$1.5 million has been spent on the venue, which is attached to the Civic Theatre and caters for an audience of 210 people.
It's about a re-emergence of a very fondly loved venue, and it's a venue that is now up to date. It's got a great tech fit out. It's really comfortable for audiences. It's right in the heart of the city. It's our hope that both producers and practitioners and audiences adopt the place once again as they did in the past.
The show, aptly named Seems Like Old Times and directed by Felicity Biggins, runs till March 19.
Elated really to be back in the place, and I can't wait till tonight with a full house, and I know all the other actors are the same about it. There's just such a great feeling.
Paul Lobb, NBN News. Since the Maritime Museum moved out of Fort Scratchley last year, its treasured pieces have been flung into storage spaces across the city, ready for the move to Honeysuckle. In the interim, a team of volunteers, as well as TAFE students, have begun the task of preserving history.
The collection really needed cataloguing, cleaning, repaired and processed, and it's given it a great boost. And from here on in, we'll train volunteers to carry on where the students left off.
The students, many of whom are training to become librarians, spent the day with the old books that form an important part of the collection.
We've got some really unique materials here, and something had to be done to stop them disintegrating at the rate that they were disintegrating.
It's great because we're never going to get in, have the contact with the sorts of books that we'll see here.
The priceless collection also boasts an original yardarm from Captain Bligh's Bounty. The new museum is due to open by the end of this year. Thousands of carp gasping for oxygen in a clearly poisoned waterway. Heavy rain a week ago filled Quarraballong Creek and the Ellalong Lagoon, but a few days after the rain, locals like Ian Stewart say the creek turned black and the fish started dying.
Never seen so many carp in my life. No, never. Not in this creek anyway.
Ian, who owns the Ellalong Farm horse stud, has had to move his prize horses away from a dam that's been contaminated by the dirty water. He's taken samples for testing and says the authorities should take more of an interest.
Well, I think the EPA should have come out here and tested it, and then we'd all have a peace of mind then, wouldn't we? Everybody in the village here. But they don't seem to want to, so I'm doing it.
The Department of Environment and Conservation told NBN News that it believes the fish kill is the result of natural causes, a high level of nutrient runoff after the rain eating up all the oxygen. Lifelong local Jodie Cagney isn't convinced.
Considering there's so many livestock drink out of it and the birds that do eat the fish, so until they actually get to the bottom of it, it's quite scary.
A discharge from a nearby coal mine caused a similar fish kill 11 years ago. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
There's little doubt the fashions in the field have changed dramatically since the Newmarket Handicap was first run in 1955. But today the glamour really was a minor sideshow. It was all about the galloping. The top trainers like Cummings and Hawkes had runners across the 8 races. In race 4, the Gay Waterhouse trained top weight Pillier was never in it. The Hunter's own Alan Robinson riding Foxy Phil home for an early win. Invited along for the ride today were the most successful trainers and jockeys from the Newmarket's 50-year history. Among them, 90-year-old Victor Oakes, the famous Muswellbrook trainer, couldn't help talking about Skeletor, the horse that won the Newmarket Handicap in 1969.
He's just on 18 hands high. He's a big horse.
And as they lined up for the 2005 Newmarket Handicap, worth $120,000, punters have backed the Warwick Farm-trained Pateza as favourite. Pateza gave trainer Guy Walter his second Newmarket Handicap. For the win, it paid $3.20 and $1.50 for the place, promising 4-year-old Cool Front was worth $2.20 in second, and Alan Robinson rode Gabfest to third, paying $3.70. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
Developer Hilton Grujon is threatening to pull the pin on his $120 million French-themed village planned for this 60-hectare site at Lochinvar surrounding the St Helena restaurant. Maitland City Council supports the development, which includes 190 home lots, but surprisingly the Department of Infrastructure and Planning wants more homes on the site.
On their 12 houses per hectare, which is the target for the area, there would be 600 houses.
But Mr Grujon says higher density is simply not an option. He believes if the St Helena development is knocked back, Maitland will lose enormous tourism and employment benefits.
200 permanent jobs, 190 homes, tourist accommodation and that French village. The choice is so simple.
But there are some supporting the state government who say in terms of the environment, high density is the best option.
We should definitely be going up in density. I mean, we're sprawling our subdivisions. We've got limited amounts of bushland left in the Lower Hunter.
And while the state government wouldn't speak on the specific development, they say there needs to be more efficient use of land in the Lower Hunter, with up to 170,000 extra homes to be built over the next 30 years.
What we are looking at is how to make the most of what we've got.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Look out, that was a clear message Marie Harmon and teammates from the Alder Park Club sent to any future rivals this morning. Raymond Terrace trailed by 13 shots or more for most of the Newcastle District 4's final. The Terrace fought back to have a chance in the final two ends, but how can you beat this sort of bowls? Alder Park stormed into the zone finals with an 8-shot win. With its first District 4's title secured, Alder Park will march into the zone final against Hunter, Lake Macquarie and Central Coast clubs. Kisses all round for the skip, and why not? She's confident of taking her side past zone to the state finals.
Well, we can go to the top, hopefully. Yeah, we'll be there trying.
The Zone 4s will be played in June. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
The Carr government has made it easier for companies to build on 800 hectares of environmentally sensitive land at Curry, known as the Hunter Economic Zone. At last night's Cessnock Council meeting, representatives from the Department of Environment and Conservation said they were satisfied with award-winning ecological assessments carried out by the developer and granted approval rights to the local council.
It's really endorsing work, ecological work that we've done on our site over the last 4 years.
But those against HES say it's just another example of the state government sacrificing the environment for the sake of development.
But they made it very clear that they're abandoning their role to protect threatened species because they think the economics of this site are more important.
What worries environmentalists is that there are no botanists, ecologists or any staff on Cessnock City Council specifically charged with looking after flora and fauna in the region.
Cessnock Council's been a promoter of this industrial estate from day one. I don't believe they have a good understanding of the conservation impacts and significance of that site.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
It was the night many thought a major sponsor would be unveiled. Instead, Newcastle's new playing strip remained neatly folded, revealing little else but numbers in what was only a sneak peek to those who attended last night. A week out from their first game, the club is still trying to convince electronics company Gizmondo to join them in a multi-million-dollar deal for their new crusade, after negotiations hit shaky ground after the Bathurst affair. Rebuilding faith, though, across the board seems the theme this year.
Our fans share the emotions, so when the players are down, they're down. They've obviously been disappointed, but they'll support them on the way back. And for us now, it's about getting onto the field and returning the favour to the fans, really.
They won't see Josh Perry for at least 2 months after he snapped a tendon in his wrist, while Kurt Gidley and Danny Medeiros are also among those sidelined at present. But this is a side and coach who have grown to be resilient.
The team understands the task in front of it, and I guess the supporters expect the team to get out there and play well, and that's what we're expecting from the players.
And there's one in particular that everyone is looking forward to seeing back when it all begins for the club in Melbourne next Sunday. On paper, the 5-time Finnish champ and former world title holder looked a clear favourite, but there's nothing like a ring to level things out. Just 21, it didn't take long to see why Jared Bothers considered a chance to go all the way to a world title fight by the end of the year. His reach was one thing, his power another, and by round 7, it was all too much for Nicholas Winberg, who conceded. Initially, Botha wasn't impressed, but you couldn't wipe the smile off once he donned the championship belt. And Newcastle Knights hooker Danny Medeiros has won the Newcastle City Council's Lord Mayor's Award for Best Performed Athlete during 2004. Announced last night, Medeiros beat a crack field for the honour, including several Olympians and last year's winner Matthew Helm. It was hard to deny a player, though, who'd captained club, state and country, was awarded the Dally M and was also named the Players Association Player of the Year. With months of preparation behind them, Newcastle was itching to put it into practice, and it didn't take long, with Scones' John Clift finishing. On the back of a powerful scrum breakaway, Dan Kevill was unstoppable, scoring a double himself, before showing all the power that has him in line for higher rep honours this year, to set up one for his Wanderers teammate Brent Dale. New England had few highlights. Luke Brown seeing yellow after this effort in defence. When he returned, it was with another bang, as New England managed to leave their mark on a game that was already well out of reach. Maitland's Darren Demick finishing off for Newcastle as they completed a 54-10 rout to kick off their country campaign in style. They'll now host Western Plains on Saturday night.
Baby Patrick just couldn't wait. Shortly after 4 this morning, soon-to-be father of 2, Sean Collins, delivered his first son at their Beresfield home with the help of ambulance 000 staff.
She said, have a look, see if the head's coming through, and I said, yeah, the head's there, and the phone's just dropped, and I grabbed a couple of towels that I had, and I just shoved them in, and I said, okay, Leanne, start pushing, this thing's coming. And before you know it, there's little baby Martin.
Came straight out, straight away. It was just instant, wasn't it?
So quick, in fact, the family hadn't even left the driveway, screams of agony soon turning into tears of joy.
Hard to put into words the feeling of actually not the first person to touch a little baby.
You ever preparing for a home birth?
Oh God, no. No way. I was so scared too, like wondering whether everything was going to be okay.
With the umbilical cord still attached, baby Patrick and Leanne were taken by ambulance to the Maitland Hospital, where both mother and son were found to be in good health. Patrick weighed in at 3.6 kilos or roughly 8 pounds, the birth providing his proud parents with quite a story to tell.
I still can't get over it.
The one catch I caught.
And they're yet to let go. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
Lining up in lane 3 next to his former idol and now rival Patrick Johnson, Ross blew away the hot field from the start. Holding form, he stopped the clock at 10.22 seconds. The 7th runner to defend the national 100-metre crown, Ross has been machine-like all season, finishing no worse than 2nd throughout the summer. He'll now prepare for the stalled gift at Easter, the race he won 2 years ago, before he heads overseas for Europe and prepare for the World Champs at Helsinki in August. Edgeworth-raised triple jumper Michael Perry broke through for a great win to end the dominance of Olympian Andrew Murphy, while high jumper Nick Moroney claimed gold as well. 800-metre runner Michael Barwick finished 2nd, while 14-year-old Olivia Toro looked positively tiny racing in lane 1 of the women's 100-metre final, but showed what a talent she is by finishing 5th. Swansea Belmont finished 2nd overall in the club point score at the State Surf Lifesaving Championships at Umina at the weekend. Joshua Blair doing everything he could to stop Cronulla's Nathan Smith from claiming his 4th consecutive Ironman crown, but he still settled for 3rd. Clubmate Lisa Wright making it 4 straight in the beach flags as Swansea Belmont pipped Terrigal for 2nd. And a number of junior hunter divers are in the mix for rep selection after the state championships at Lambton Pool at the weekend.
With a burgeoning population and booming development, Maitland City Council has identified a very real need for passive open space. Among other things, that includes cycleways and barbecue areas.
There's a much more focus now on that passive recreation and open space need, and that's a lot to do with lifestyle and work commitments and less leisure time.
Playgrounds too form an important part of that leisure time, with council upkeeping these areas to cater for young families in particular.
And we underwent a rationalisation about 3 years ago which replaced a number of our existing facilities to meet the new standards, and we also undertake annual maintenance regimes to make sure that they're safe, and we do have plans to build more in the city.
They'll feature in Maitland's new estates along with picnic areas.
Some of the localities are around the Rutherford-Aberglasslyn area, certainly the Thornton North, Gilliston Heights.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
A world champion, it was the Australian title that eluded Lisa Wright last year after she had won it in 2003. As the final field this time around was whittled down, Wright started the last dash as an unbackable favourite. The physio student flagging high praise.
Possibly the best ever women's flags person ever.
It was one of 3 golds for Hunter Clubbies, with Matt Rawson and Redhead's Boyd Conrick also amongst the winners. The Premier League hockey season is underway once again, and there were few surprises in round 1, with all the favoured sides getting the points. The entrants winning the Battle of the Central Coast, while wins too for West, South and North, which hammered Uni. And a mixed weekend for Hunter clubs in the Premier League Lawn Bowls competition, with Toronto rolling Windale Gateshead, while Charlestown also went down. They did get a win up in their second game of the doubleheader weekend, while Maitland City kept its finals hopes alive as well.
Concrete mixing trucks will become part of the landscape in the Hunter Economic Zone, a new batching plant, much like this one, among the first businesses to set up shop.
Well, to do anything in a construction area, you need concrete.
Hunter Land, owned by Hilton Grujon, has purchased 30 hectares within the HEZ, which could potentially hold up to 10 businesses, generating development worth $150 million. At the batching plant, 12 jobs will be created initially, with another 30 to follow, while the Hunter Revegetation Corporation is looking to employ 30 people to help with landscaping within the zone and 40 staff to operate its nursery.
We're going to set up a 6 hectare operation consisting of wholesale production areas and retail garden centre.
With the now endangered spotted gum and ironbark trees located within the precinct, HEZ says it's satisfied state requirements.
They have said there is adequate communities of that conserved in our conservation areas.
All the environmental issues have been addressed and all the government agencies have signed off.
Adam McIlwright, NBN News.
Several options have already been explored to bring forward the 20-year prognosis on completing dual carriageways from Hexham right to the Queensland border. The Federal Transport Minister, Mr Anderson, said today he hoped that with greater taxpayer contribution, the work could be done within the next 7 years.
The reality is that this particular piece of engineering is so big and so complicated and frankly will be swallowing up so much taxpayers' money that it doesn't seem unreasonable that those who benefit most from its usage might be given the option of contributing a little more.
However, Mr Anderson said he would ensure that smaller communities that rely on the Pacific Highway for local commuting would not be affected.
We have to make certain that people who simply used a part of the road in their everyday business, going to work, doing the shopping, picking up the kids, were not paying a toll.
The Road Transport Association accepts the idea of tolls, but says they should not apply only to trucks.
The toll has to be for road users, and if there are specific groups for whom an exemption is justified, we think we need to sit down and work out whether their circumstances justify an exemption from a toll.
The Federal Transport Minister said all options, including private enterprise involvement and tolls to recover costs, will be considered, and it will be 2 to 3 months before a more concrete plan can be announced.
If Knights players believe things can only get better after successive losses to start the season, they'd be right. With Danny Medeiros and Kurt Gidley both among a list of injured expected to make their return in 2 weeks against the Cowboys, the weekend bye may not provide Craig Smith with as much time he'd like to prepare.
Cowboys will give me 2 weeks, whether that's enough training under my belt, we won't know until the day comes, sort of thing, you know. If not Cowboys, definitely the week after, I'd say.
Without a pre-season preparation, you can understand Smith's wish for time. Several of his new teammates, though, can't wait to start.
Yeah, I'm stinging to play. It's you train all off-season to play in the comp, and to miss the first 2 games, it's not very good.
Andrew Johns wasn't feeling that way either against the Raiders, and with good reason. Scans today showed he's torn a muscle near his hip, which will require the weekend break to recover from. Meanwhile, Matthew Gidley was cleared of any further action after being placed on report for a high tackle.
The cul-de-sac of the rural residential estate that the Winter family had called home remains sealed off today as police continued to investigate the Hunter's second murder-suicide involving a young family in the space of just 8 months. Police named the victims as 32-year-old Sally Elizabeth Winter, her 32-year-old husband Stephen, 4-year-old son Jake and 3-year-old daughter Casey. With investigations not quite 24 hours old, forensic information from the scene allowed police to reveal what appears to have happened.
Sally Winter has used a firearm which has resulted in the death of her husband and her 2 children before turning the firearm upon herself, resulting in her death.
A relative made the grim discovery yesterday afternoon. Police sent to the Forest Hill Drive property just minutes from the centre of Maitland soon located a weapon believed used in the incident. Detectives have now engaged in an extensive investigation for a report to the coroner on the circumstances that led up to the tragedy, the causes of death and establishing the family's last movements.
We're still working through that because there's been a couple of versions which we've got to clarify and we should get a clearer picture on that by the end of the day.
The impact on the local community will be reflected tomorrow evening when Maitland City councillors observe a 1-minute silence as a mark of respect. Police have also been affected. In July last year, Michael Richardson, his wife Roxanne and their 2 children were found dead inside their East Gresford home north of Maitland, prompting this plea.
This is really very tragic and it does affect the community as well as the relatives and the investigating the police as well. I would urge anyone that has any problems to try to seek assistance.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
For a 2-year-old, Stratum has a real head for shoes, but when it's a golden slipper, the mantelpiece might be the best place for this famed piece of racing history. Just getting it out of Connection's hands, though, is hard enough.
I've got it at the moment, he's got to get it.
You'll have to win another one then.
Yeah, he'll have to win another one, yeah.
The way Terry Wallace picks yearlings of late with his great mate Paul Perry, that's a real possibility. After their success with Schwazier only 2 years ago, they watched their latest champion win the one he couldn't in the famous $3 million race, with an effort that only multiplied his own price tag.
There's been a good bit of interest in the horse, I think any slipper winner.
But if he's even on the market is another thing.
I wouldn't think so. Not at the moment, it's a bit early,
And why would you sell, given this is just his first preparation, which is expected to be rounded out at the weekend with another group event, the Sires Produce Stakes.
Over the weekend today he's done really well and he looks bright as a new pin really, so probably head that way.
It's the same meeting stablemate Fastnet Rock will square up against Delingy in what promises to be another big day out. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
As the John Hunter Hospital expands, its neighbouring road network is approaching breaking point. To fix traffic congestion, the RTA intends to replace the busy Lookout Road roundabout at the entrance to the hospital with traffic lights. Under the plan, vehicles would not be allowed to turn from Lookout Road into the Ridgeway Road area of New Lambton Heights. Residents and the Newcastle City Council believe that would put pressure on residential back streets and today lobbied the RTA to retain access on and off Lookout Road.
And I hope that they're able to accommodate what we've been asking for, and if they can, it's likely the residents will accept a modified version of the traffic lights, but in place of the roundabout.
So we believe that the RTA should retain access for us to get in and out at the roundabout intersection.
However, residents and the council both maintain traffic lights are a band-aid solution. Both say a second entrance to the hospital, which was promised by the Carr government in 2001, would fix the traffic problem. Newcastle Lord Mayor John Tate says construction of the entrance is being stalled by a disagreement between the RTA and Hunter New England Area Health.
It would appear that one government department is wanting the other government department to pay for it.
The RTA will discuss revised plans with residents and the council next week. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
As traditional as Easter eggs this long weekend, the hub of the Hunter Singles is tipped to return in the spring at Maitland City Bowling Club as a $30,000 event, which would restore it as the biggest local tournament. There's $6,000 up for grabs at the Pairs this weekend, where 32 teams are competing in the best of 6-game tournament, and Clay Parker was showing the form today, which has won him both state and Australian titles in the past. Winners here 2 years ago, Mick Beasley has teamed again with Terry McCabe, and they look on song to make it another title with a strong first-up match today. With Premier League experience, the pair monstered Joe Wilmot and Graham Hogan by a massive 39 shots to 13 to be well placed. It wraps up tomorrow.
Months or often years of sweat and labour have been poured into these boats in the name of restoration on show at Lake Macquarie's Heritage Afloat. Built in Swansea some 42 years ago, the Southern Cross has always called Lake Macquarie home, saved from the scrap heap.
I could not let it go to rack and ruin. Nah, that's sacrilege.
Those new canopies did well to shelter the rain, then sun. But they weren't all restorations. Elsie May was built in 1991, a replica of a Tasmanian river ferry. In its first official outing since restoration, the Kestrel, a timber steam launch built in 1895, has to be the feature, with no amount of polish spared. Then there's the fixers, boats which need much more than a lick of paint, and this one's for sale, but it takes a special type of someone to buy it. Someone with a spare $30,000.
Needs a lot of time, love and time.
Adam McKilrick, NBN News.